The massive space station hung above the crystal world like a giant metal moon. Inside its gleaming corridors, beings from across the galaxy gathered for the most important meeting in 1,000 years. The Galactic Council chamber stretched wide, enough to hold a city, its walls made of flowing light that changed colors with each speaker's mood. Council Speaker Zixhal stood at the center podium, his 4 bright eyes scanning the assembled delegates. His insect-like body towered 12 feet high, covered in chitinous armor that reflected the chamber's shifting lights. Around him sat representatives from 12 different worlds, each more alien than the last. There were the gas beings from Zephyr floating in their containment bubbles. The rock creatures from Granitus sat motionless like living mountains. The telepathic Mindari hummed in perfect harmony, while the aquatic deeplings swam in their mobile water tanks. At the defendant's platform stood Commander Jake Morrison, the sole human representative. His blue uniform looked plain compared to the exotic forms around him, but his steady gaze never wavered as he faced the Council's accusations. Behind him, holographic displays showed images of human colonies, mining operations, and fleet movements that had brought him before this tribunal. Zixhal's voice boomed through the chamber's translation system. Commander Morrison of the species known as humans, you stand accused of gross violations of galactic law. Your people have established unauthorized colonies in 17 star systems. You have stripped entire asteroids of rare minerals without permit. Most seriously, your military vessels have entered the sacred neutral zone, a region that has remained untouched for 3 millennia. Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. Honored Council, my species faces a crisis. Earth's population has grown beyond 10 billion souls. Our homeworld can no longer sustain us. We need new worlds, new resources, or our people will starve. A ripple of disgust passed through the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian representative, Velthar, expanded his gaseous form to twice its normal size. This creature speaks of need as if it justifies theft. The sacred systems, they have violated our home to peaceful beings who have maintained harmony for countless generations. The holographic displays shifted to show footage of human soldiers in combat armor, their weapons firing bright energy beams at unseen targets. Another image revealed massive mining ships tearing into an asteroid field, leaving only debris and emptiness behind. Morrison watched the images with a grim expression, knowing how they appeared to beings who valued peace above all else. The Mindari delegates' thoughts projected directly into everyone's minds. We have observed this species for several of their decades. They are violent by nature, always fighting among themselves when not fighting others. Their history is written in blood and conquest. They consume resources at an unsustainable rate and show no respect for the natural balance of ecosystems. Morrison tried to defend his species. Yes, we have conflicts, but we also have great capacity for growth and change. We have ended many of our worst practices. We seek to learn from more advanced civilizations like yours. Zixhal's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Learn. Your actions speak louder than words, human. We have reports from 14 different species who have encountered your kind. They describe humans as aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerous. The gentle ones of Serenity Prime fled their system entirely after human miners began operations on their sacred moons. The evidence continued mounting against humanity. Trade disputes where human negotiators had become violent when agreements went against them. Instances where human explorers had ignored quarantine protocols, potentially spreading diseases to isolated worlds. Reports of human pirates raiding merchant vessels in the outer systems. Morrison's jaw tightened as he listened. Some of the accusations were true, though often lacking context. Others were exaggerated or completely false. But he could see the council had already made their decision. The trial was merely ceremony. The Deepling representative gurgled through her water tank speaker system. This species represents everything we have tried to eliminate from galactic civilization. They are chaos incarnate, spreading discord wherever they travel. Their very presence destabilizes the peace we have maintained for so long. Velthar drifted closer to the center of the chamber. There is only one solution that protects both the galaxy and removes this threat permanently. We propose banishment to Sector 66 Omega. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Even Morrison, who had expected harsh punishment, felt his blood turn cold. Every spacefaring species knew about Sector 66 Omega. It was the region where 3 dying stars created gravitational anomalies that could tear ships apart without warning. Worse, unstable wormholes connected it to dimensions where nightmarish creatures existed. No exploration mission sent there had ever returned. The rock-being delegate from Granitus spoke in a voice like grinding stone. That sector is not a place of exile. It is a place of death. No life can survive there for more than days. Zixhal raised one clawed hand. Perhaps, but it will ensure this species can never again threaten galactic peace. They claim to be adaptable and resilient. Let them prove it in a place where such qualities truly matter. Morrison stepped forward again, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. You cannot condemn an entire species to death for the actions of some. There are 10 billion humans on Earth alone, plus millions more on our colonies. Most have never even left their home systems. The Mindari delegate's thoughts pressed against every mind present. The violent nature is inherent in your species. Your own history proves this. You have had global wars, genocide, environmental destruction. Even now, when faced with extinction, your first response is to take what belongs to others, rather than find peaceful solutions. Morrison tried one last appeal. Give us a chance to prove we can change. Place restrictions on our expansion. Monitor our colonies. But don't sentence innocent people to die for crimes they didn't commit. Zixhal's 4 eyes focused on Morrison with cold calculation. The Council has deliberated on this matter for many cycles. We have reviewed all evidence and considered all possibilities. The verdict is unanimous. The chamber fell silent as each delegate prepared to cast their vote. Morrison knew the outcome before they began, but he watched anyway as after being condemned his entire species to exile in hell. The species known as humans is hereby banished from civilized space. They have 30 standard days to evacuate all colonies and population centers. All human vessels will report to Sector 666 Omega for permanent relocation. Any human found in civilized space after this deadline will be destroyed without warning. Morrison stared at the assembled delegates, memorizing each face that had just voted to exterminate humanity. You're making a mistake. You think you're protecting the galaxy, but you're about to unleash something far worse than anything you've seen from us. Zixhal's mandibles clicked again. Empty threats from a condemned species. Guards, escort this human to his ship. As Morrison was led away, he activated his personal communicator one last time. The message transmitted instantly to Earth and every human colony across known space. Admiral Collins, this is Morrison. The Council vote was unanimous. We have 30 days to evacuate everything. They're sending us to Sector 666 Omega. He paused, watching the alien delegates congratulate each other on solving the human problem. They think they're sending us to die. They have no idea what they've just unleashed. The communication ended, and Morrison was escorted to his small courier ship. As he prepared for departure, he looked back at the massive Council Station 1. Last time, the beings inside believed they had just saved the galaxy from humanity's violent nature. They would learn how wrong they were. Captain Lisa Rodriguez gripped her command chair as the UES Defiant shuddered through another gravity wave. Around her ship, 300 human vessels moved in a ragged convoy toward their doom. The fleet stretched across space like a wounded animal. Military cruisers protecting civilian transports while mining ships and colony vessels carried everything humanity could salvage from their scattered worlds. The bridge screens showed the edge of Sector 66 Omega growing larger ahead of them. What had once been empty space now twisted with unnatural colors that hurt to look at directly. Stars flickered between red and purple, while others seemed to fold in on themselves, creating spiral patterns that defied physics. Rodriguez had seen combat in 12 different systems, but nothing had prepared her for this nightmare of warped reality. "Ma'am, we're getting readings that don't make sense," reported Lieutenant Gary Stone from the sensor station. "The gravitational fields are shifting every few seconds. Some areas show negative mass while others register as having the density of a neutron star. It's like space itself is broken here. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The 30-day evacuation had been chaos from start to finish. Millions of humans packed whatever they could carry and abandoned colonies that had taken decades to build. Entire families crowded into cargo holds while children cried for homes they would never see again. The lucky ones made it to proper passenger ships. Others traveled in converted mining haulers with minimal life support. Admiral Sam Collins commanded the exodus from his flagship, the massive carrier UES Endurance. His voice crackled over the comm system as the fleet approached the boundary of their new prison. All ships maintain formation. We don't know what we're flying into, but we face it together. Humanity has survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We'll survive this too. The first ships crossed into Sector 66 Omega and immediately ran into trouble. The transport vessel New Hope suddenly lurched sideways as a gravity field grabbed it and flung it toward a cluster of asteroids that hadn't been there moments before. Captain Julie Warren fought her controls as her ship spun wildly through space before finally breaking free of the anomaly. Rodriguez watched her tactical display fill with warnings as more vessels encountered the sector's defenses. The mining ship Terra Firma vanished entirely when it flew through what looked like empty space, but turned out to be a spatial fold that compressed the ship to the size of a marble before spitting it out as scrap metal. 43 miners died in an instant. "Captain, something's coming through that tear in space," called out Lieutenant Karen Mills from the communications station. She pointed at the main screen where a jagged rip had opened in the fabric of reality itself. Through the gap, something moved in the darkness beyond. The creature that emerged defied description. It was part shadow and part substance, shifting between solid and gas while maintaining a roughly humanoid shape. Its eyes burned with cold fire while claws that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once reached toward the nearest human ship. The transport Golden Gate tried to turn away, but the creature moved faster than thought, covering the distance in seconds. Rodriguez watched in horror as the shadow being passed through the transport's shields like they weren't there. The ship's hull began dissolving wherever the creature touched it. Not destroyed, but somehow convinced it had never existed in the first place. Emergency pods launched as the crew abandoned ship, but even those were being consumed by the nightmare that had already killed 200 civilians. "All weapons target that thing," Rodriguez ordered. The Defiant's particle beams lanced out, striking the shadow creature directly in what might have been its center mass. The energy passed right through without effect, as if the creature existed, partially outside normal space where human weapons couldn't reach it. More tiers opened across the fleet's formation. Dozens of the shadow beings poured through, each one selecting a different human vessel to attack. The military ships tried to form a protective screen around the civilians, but their weapons were useless against enemies that lived between dimensions. In the first hour of their exile, humanity lost 12 ships and over 3,000 lives to creatures that shouldn't exist. Admiral Collins ordered the fleet to retreat deeper into the sector, hoping to find an area where the dimensional barriers were more stable. They found a cluster of asteroids that seemed relatively normal, gravity fields that obeyed standard physics, and no visible tiers in space-time. The surviving ships gathered around the largest asteroid while damage control teams assessed their losses. Dr. Maya Patel worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the science vessel Discovery. As humanity's leading expert on alien life forms, she had volunteered to study whatever they encountered in their new home. The readings her sensors collected from the shadow creatures made no sense according to any known biology or physics. "They're not fully in our dimension," she reported to Admiral Collins during an emergency briefing. "These beings exist partially in what we might call parallel space. That's why our weapons can't hit them and why they can pass through solid matter, but they can still affect our reality when they choose to." Captain Bob Foster led a reconnaissance mission to explore more of their new territory. His small squadron of fighters moved carefully through the twisted space, mapping safe passages between the gravity anomalies and dimensional tiers. What they found was a graveyard of civilizations stretching back thousands of years. Massive alien structures drifted in the void, their hulls scarred by the same dimensional attacks that had nearly destroyed the human fleet. Foster recognized ship designs from at least 6 different species, all of them clearly advanced enough for interstellar travel. Yet something had killed them all and left their vessels to drift as monuments to failure. "Admiral, you need to see this," Foster transmitted as his fighter approached what looked like a space station the size of a small moon. The structure was covered in symbols and writing that the computer couldn't translate, but its purpose was clear. It had been a research facility, probably built by whatever species had been exiled here before humanity. The station's data cores were still partially functional. Foster's team extracted what information they could and transmitted it back to Dr. Patel for analysis. What she discovered changed everything they thought they knew about their situation. The Galactic Council has been using this sector as a dumping ground for over 3,000 years, Patel announced to the fleet commanders. Every species they considered too dangerous or too independent got sent here to die. We're not the first and we won't be the last. The record showed dozens of different civilizations that had been exiled to Sector 666 Omega. Some lasted only days before the shadow creatures consumed them entirely. Others survived for months or even years, building impressive defenses before ultimately succumbing to the dimensional predators that called this place home. But humanity began to learn. Engineer Carlos Vega studied the wreckage of alien defense systems and started designing new shield configurations that might deflect dimensional attacks. Pilot Amy Chen practiced flying through the gravity anomalies until she could navigate them by instinct alone. Marine Sergeant Tony Miller trained his soldiers to fight enemies they couldn't see or touch directly. The breakthrough came when Dr. Patel realized the shadow creatures weren't random monsters, but the transformed remains of previous exiles. The dimensional energy that saturated Sector 666 Omega slowly changed any life form exposed to it for extended periods. The beings that attacked them had once been flesh and blood aliens like themselves, driven mad by centuries of exposure to energies that existed outside normal reality. "If we're going to survive here, we need to understand how this transformation works," Patel explained during another fleet meeting. "These creatures aren't just hunting us for food. They're trying to change us into something like them. The question is whether we can control that change instead of being destroyed by it." Admiral Collins looked around at his surviving captains. They had lost 30 ships and nearly 6,000 people in their first week of exile, but they were still alive, still fighting, and most importantly, still learning. The Galactic Council had sent them here to die, but humanity had other plans. "We're not going to just survive," Collins announced to the entire fleet. "We're going to master this place. And when we do, the Council is going to regret the day they decided to make an enemy of humanity." 6 months after their exile began, humanity had transformed their corner of hell into something that resembled home. The asteroid cluster they now called New Terra buzzed with activity as ships moved between mining operations and construction sites. Where once there had been only death and darkness, human ingenuity had carved out a pocket of civilization in the most hostile region of known space. Captain Ben Clark adjusted his new armor as he prepared for another hunting mission. The suit was unlike anything human technology had produced before, forged from the crystallized remains of shadow creatures that his team had managed to destroy. The material existed partially in multiple dimensions, allowing Clark and his void hunters to track their prey through the twisted space-time of Sector 666 Omega. The shadow beings had learned to fear humans, something that had never happened before in the 3,000 years since the first species was exiled here. Clark's team had developed weapons that fired concentrated bursts of dimensional energy, tearing through the creatures' defenses and anchoring them in normal space long enough to be killed. Each victory taught them more about how to survive in their impossible environment. Dr. Maya Patel stood in her expanded laboratory aboard the research station that had been built into the largest asteroid. Her team had grown to include dozens of scientists studying every aspect of their new home. The breakthrough discoveries came almost daily now as humans adapted to physics that operated by alien rules. "The wormholes aren't random," Patel explained to Admiral Collins during their weekly briefing. "They follow patterns we're just beginning to understand. Kevin Murphy has mapped 17 stable pathways that we can use for transportation across vast distances. The same dimensional tiers that were meant to kill us have become our highway system. Dr. Kevin Murphy, a former astrophysicist from Mars Colony, had spent months studying the unstable wormholes that appeared throughout the sector. What seemed like chaos to other species revealed itself as a complex network to human observers. Murphy learned to predict when and where new tiers would open, allowing human ships to travel instantly between distant points in space. Dr. Rachel Stone worked alongside Murphy to understand the fundamental forces at work in their new home. The dimensional energy that saturated everything in Sector 6666 Omega could be harnessed and controlled with the right equipment. Human engineers began building generators that used this energy to power their growing civilization, drawing strength from the very forces meant to destroy them. Colony Administrator Helen Brooks managed the construction of New Terra's main habitat, a massive space station that grew larger each day. The station was built using materials that existed in quantum superposition, neither fully solid nor completely energy, but something between the two states. The wall shimmered with patterns that hurt alien eyes to look at, but seemed perfectly normal to humans who had adapted to their environment. The construction crews worked with metals extracted from the corpses of dimensional titans, massive creatures that drifted between realities and occasionally died in normal space. These materials were lighter than aluminum but stronger than diamond, allowing human architects to build structures that defied conventional engineering. The main habitat dome stretched 3 kilometers across, while weighing no more than a small asteroid. Commander Danny Foster led the deep exploration missions that ventured into the most dangerous regions of Sector 666 Omega. His ships were equipped with the latest dimensional shielding and crewed by pilots who had learned to navigate space where up and down changed meaning every few minutes. Foster's mission was to map the extent of their prison and search for resources that could support humanity's growing population. During one expedition to the sector's core region, Foster's team discovered something that changed their understanding of their situation entirely. Hidden in a nebula of crystallized time was a massive structure that clearly showed signs of intelligent construction. The ruins stretched for hundreds of kilometers and appeared to be the remains of a great city that had once existed between dimensions. Foster's archaeological team, led by Dr. Lisa Hayes, began exploring the alien ruins with careful precision. The architecture was unlike anything in known galactic civilization, built by beings who understood dimensional physics far better than even the advanced council races. The crystalline libraries they discovered contained information that had been preserved for thousands of years. The ruins belonged to the Kethmori, an ancient species that had been exiled to Sector 666 Omega 3 millennia ago by an earlier version of the Galactic Council. Unlike the other species that had been sent here to die, the Kethmori had survived for over 1,000 years before finally succumbing to the dimensional predators that hunted them. But before their extinction, the Kethmori had learned secrets that the Council desperately wanted to keep hidden. Their crystal archives contained detailed records of Council military capabilities, star charts showing the locations of major installations, and most importantly, the access codes to dimensional pathways that led directly to the heart of Council, space. The Kethmori had discovered that the Council was not the benevolent peacekeeping organization they claimed to be. They were tyrants who eliminated any species that showed the potential to challenge their dominance over the galaxy. The exile system was their method of committing genocide while maintaining their image as protectors of galactic peace. Dr. Hayes worked with her team to translate the Kethmori records, uncovering a history of oppression that stretched back tens of thousands of years. Hundreds of species had been destroyed not for being violent or aggressive, but for being too independent or innovative. The Council feared competition more than they valued life itself. The information contained in the crystal libraries gave humanity something they had never expected to find in their place of exile: hope for revenge. The dimensional pathways mapped by the Kethmori could allow human ships to appear anywhere in Council space without warning. The military intelligence they had gathered revealed weaknesses in Council defenses that could be exploited, but the most important discovery was biological. The Kethmori records showed that exposure to dimensional energy didn't just transform beings into shadow creatures. Under the right conditions, it could enhance natural abilities and grant new powers that existed outside normal physical laws. The key was controlling the exposure rather than being overwhelmed by it. Human children born in Sector 666 Omega showed signs of this enhancement. They could see partially into other dimensions, predicting the appearance of spatial anomalies minutes before they occurred. Some displayed telepathic abilities that worked across vast distances by using dimensional shortcuts. A few could manipulate gravity fields with their thoughts alone. The adults weren't immune to change either. Soldiers who had fought the shadow, creatures for months, found their reflexes enhanced beyond human norms. Engineers working with dimensional materials developed an intuitive understanding of physics that allowed them to build impossible structures. Scientists studying the exotic energies began to think in ways that transcended their original limitations. Admiral Collins realized that humanity was evolving into something beyond what they had been when the Council first exiled them. The very environment meant to destroy them was transforming them into beings of incredible power. The question was whether they would retain their humanity or become something else entirely. The answer came during a Council surveillance mission that detected human activity in Sector 666 Omega. The probe sent to investigate found not the empty graveyard the Council expected, but a thriving civilization that had mastered technologies beyond galactic understanding. The images transmitted back to Council space showed humans who moved between dimensions as easily as walking through doorways. Council Speaker Zixhal reviewed the surveillance footage with growing horror. The beings in the images still looked human, but they moved with impossible grace and manipulated energies that could tear apart starships. These were not the primitive savages the Council had exiled. They were something far more dangerous. "Send a message to all Council military forces," Zixhal ordered his subordinates. "Increase patrols around Sector 666 Omega. Under no circumstances are any ships to approach the boundary. We may have made a terrible mistake." But it was already too late. Deep in the heart of their dimensional fortress, humanity was preparing for war. They had learned to survive in hell and emerged stronger than ever before. Soon, they would show the galaxy exactly what the Council had created when they tried to destroy the human spirit. The exile was ending, but humanity's revenge was just beginning. 1 year after their banishment to hell, Admiral Sam Collins stood in the war room aboard New Terra and looked at the faces of humanity's transformed leadership. These were no longer the desperate refugees who had fled Council space 12 months ago. They had become something else entirely, shaped by forces that existed beyond normal reality. Captain Lisa Rodriguez bore scars from dimensional combat that glowed with otherworldly energy, shifting between blue and purple as they pulsed, with power from another realm. Her eyes had changed too, now able to see partially into parallel dimensions where the shadow creatures dwelt. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that shouldn't exist in normal space. Dr. Maya Patel's hair had turned silver from exposure to dimensional radiation. But her mind worked faster than ever before. She could process information from multiple realities simultaneously and understand scientific principles that would have been impossible to grasp with an unenhanced human brain. Her research team had made discoveries that would revolutionize galactic civilization if anyone survived to benefit from them. Commander Danny Foster moved with inhuman grace. His body adapted to function in environments where gravity changed direction every few seconds. His exploration teams had mapped every dimensional pathway in their sector and discovered routes that led to places the Council didn't even know existed. The knowledge they had gained made them the most dangerous scouts in the galaxy. General Alex Turner commanded an army unlike anything the universe had ever seen. His soldiers had trained against enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, fought battles where the laws of physics changed mid-combat, and survived in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. They were no longer entirely human, but they were still loyal to humanity's cause. The decision to return to Council space had been unanimous among the leadership, but not as the broken refugees the Council expected. They would return as conquerors, bringing the fury of hell itself to those who had condemned them to die in the dimensional nightmare of Sector 666 Omega. Dr. Patel presented her latest breakthrough to the assembled War Council. The dimensional creatures that had once hunted them could now be controlled and directed toward specific targets. By manipulating the quantum frequencies of the wormhole tears, humanity could open portals directly above council worlds and release swarms of shadow, beings that would tear through any defense. The same monsters they sent to kill us are now our weapons, Patel explained as holographic displays showed shadow creatures responding to human commands. We can direct them anywhere in the galaxy through the dimensional network we've mapped. The Council's own exile system has given us the perfect delivery method for their destruction. Engineer Carlos Vega had spent the year designing humanity's new war fleet using principles that defied conventional understanding. The ships existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track with standard sensors or target with traditional weapons. Their hulls were forged from materials that existed in quantum superposition, neither fully matter nor energy, but something between the two states. The weapon systems Vega had created fired projectiles through dimensional shortcuts, allowing them to bypass shields and armor by appearing directly inside enemy vessels. The defensive systems redirected incoming energy attacks into parallel dimensions, where they harmlessly dissipated. These ships were not just advanced technology, but expressions of humanity's evolution into something beyond their original limitations. Commander. Foster's exploration teams had discovered the most important strategic advantage of all. The dimensional pathways mapped throughout Sector 6666 Omega connected to every major system in Council space through routes that bypassed all early warning networks and defensive installations. The Council's own banishment protocols had created secret backdoors into their most secure territories. We can appear anywhere we want without warning, Foster reported to the War Council. The dimensional tunnels lead directly to their capital worlds, military bases, and resource centers. They'll never see us coming until we're already there destroying everything they've built. General Turner's soldiers had undergone transformations that made them the ultimate warriors. They had learned to fight enemies that could phase in and out of reality, adapt to battlefields where gravity reversed itself without warning, and survive exposure to energies that existed outside the normal electromagnetic spectrum. Each soldier was worth 100 conventional fighters, but the psychological preparation was just as important as the physical changes. These men and women had watched their families suffer in exile, seen their friends die in dimensional attacks, and endured a year of hardship in the most hostile environment known to exist. Their anger had been refined into a weapon sharper than any blade. Captain Rodriguez addressed the assembled fleet commanders as they prepared for humanity's return to civilized space. Her scars glowed brighter as her emotions intensified, reflecting power that came from surviving in literal hell. They sent us here to die because they feared what we might become. They were right to fear us, but they never imagined we would survive to show them exactly what they created. The final preparations took months as humanity built the infrastructure needed to support their invasion of Council space. Dimensional forge worlds were constructed in parallel realities, where time moved differently, allowing years of production to occur in weeks of normal time. Armies of shadow creatures were trained and organized into units that could be deployed through wormhole networks with surgical precision. The new human fleet assembled in formations that hurt alien minds to observe. Ships phased between dimensions, while maintaining combat effectiveness in normal space. Weapons systems charged with energies that shouldn't exist according to galactic science. Soldiers who looked human but moved with abilities that transcended biological limitations prepared for battles that would reshape the galaxy. Dr. Patel made one final discovery that changed their invasion plans entirely. The dimensional energy that had transformed humanity could be weaponized on a planetary scale. By opening large enough tiers in space-time above Council worlds, they could expose entire populations to the same forces that had changed them. The choice would be simple: submit to human rule or be transformed into something that no longer cared about political independence. Admiral Collins reviewed the final battle plans with his transformed command staff. Every major Council world would be attacked simultaneously through dimensional portals that appeared without warning. Their fleets would be destroyed by weapons they couldn't detect until it was too late. Their leaders would face warriors who had been forged in the fires of dimensional hell. The irony was perfect. The Council had sent humanity to Sector 666 Omega to eliminate the threat they represented to galactic peace. Instead, they had given humans access to powers and technologies that made their previous capabilities seem primitive by comparison. The exile had not weakened humanity, but had transformed them into the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever known. As the invasion fleet prepared to depart through dimensional gateways, Collins transmitted one final message to the human colonies, hidden throughout normal space. Citizens of Earth and all human worlds, today we return to the galaxy that tried to destroy us. We go not as refugees seeking mercy, but as conquerors claiming what is rightfully ours. The Council wanted to see what humans could become when pushed to our limits. They're about to find out. The dimensional portals opened like wounds in reality itself, and humanity's transformed fleet began its journey home. Hell was coming to Council space, and there would be no mercy for those who had condemned an entire species to what they thought was certain death. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and anyone who disagreed would learn why the Council's exile had been the greatest mistake in galactic history. The Galactic Council's annual assembly on Vorthak Prime proceeded exactly as it had for 3,000 years. Representatives from 12 species gathered in the Great Crystal Chamber to discuss trade routes and territorial disputes while the afternoon sun cast rainbow patterns through the translucent walls. Council Speaker Zixhal reviewed the agenda with satisfaction, noting that the human problem was listed as resolved business. The surveillance reports from Sector 66 Omega showed no signs of life for the past 6 months. Long-range sensors detected only the familiar energy signatures of dimensional storms and shadow creature activity. The human exile had proceeded exactly as planned, with an entire species eliminated without the Council having to fire a single shot. Zixhal's mandibles clicked with pleasure as he prepared to mark humanity as officially extinct. That pleasant assumption died when reality tore open above their capital city. The dimensional rift appeared without warning, a jagged wound in space-time that stretched across the sky like a massive scar. Through the tier came ships that shouldn't exist, vessels that phased between solid and translucent while maintaining perfect formation. The hulls reflected light that existed in spectrums invisible to most galactic species, and their weapons charged with energies that made the air itself scream. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the lead vessel, as humanity's dimensional fleet emerged directly from hell into the heart of Council space. Her ship materialized above the Council chamber itself, casting shadows that moved independently of any light source. The dimensional scars on her face glowed brighter as she opened communications to every receiver in the system. Citizens of the galaxy, you have been ruled by tyrants who eliminate anyone who threatens their power. They sent my species to die in the dimensional hell of Sector 66 Omega. We didn't die. We evolved. Admiral Sam Collins coordinated the attack from his flagship as human vessels appeared throughout the Vorthak system. Each ship emerged from its own dimensional portal, bypassing every defense and early warning system the Council had constructed over millennia of technological advancement. The element of surprise was total and devastating. The Council's defense fleet responded with predictable tactics, firing energy beams and missile volleys at the human ships. Their weapons passed harmlessly through vessels that existed partially in parallel dimensions, while return fire from humanity's evolved technology tore through Council shields and armor like they were made of paper. Swarms of shadow creatures poured through the dimensional rifts, but these were not the wild predators that had once hunted humans in Sector 666 Omega. Under human control, the dimensional beings moved with deadly precision, targeting Council military installations while avoiding civilian areas. The same monsters that were supposed to consume humanity now served as their weapons against those who had condemned them to exile. The battle for Vorthak Prime was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Council ships fired at enemies that appeared and vanished without warning, their targeting systems unable to lock onto vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human fighters phased through solid obstacles, delivering devastating attacks before disappearing into parallel space where conventional weapons couldn't follow. General Alex Turner led the ground assault on the Council chamber itself. His soldiers moved through the crystal walls like ghosts, their dimensional abilities allowing them to bypass every physical barrier the building's architects had designed. The council guards fired their weapons frantically, but the energy beams passed through human soldiers who had learned to exist partially outside normal reality. Council Speaker Zixhal watched in horror as his security forces were overwhelmed by warriors who fought according to laws of physics that didn't apply in normal space. These humans moved with impossible speed, struck from angles that shouldn't exist, and shrugged off weapons that could destroy armored vehicles. They were no longer the primitive species he remembered from their trial. The council delegates cowered in their chambers as human soldiers materialized from thin air around them. The rock beings from Granitus found their stone bodies cracking under dimensional pressure that attacked them on multiple reality levels. The gas creatures from Zephyr discovered that their containment systems offered no protection against weapons that fired through parallel space. Commander Danny Foster appeared in the council chamber through a dimensional gateway that opened directly beneath the speaker's podium. His enhanced abilities allowed him to move between realities as easily as walking between rooms. Foster's eyes had changed from their original brown to a shifting pattern of colors that existed only in dimensional space. Council Speaker Zixhal, Foster said as his voice carried harmonics from multiple dimensions simultaneously. You remember Commander Jake Morrison, the human who stood trial here exactly 1 year ago? He sends his regards from our new home. In Sector 666 Omega, Zixhal's four eyes focused on Foster with growing terror. The being before him looked human but moved with powers that transcended biological limitations. This is impossible. No species has ever survived exile to that sector. The dimensional creatures should have consumed you within days. Foster smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed with energies from parallel realities. They tried. We learned to fight back. Then we learned to control them. Then we learned to become something they couldn't touch. The council taught us that survival belongs to the strongest. Congratulations on creating perfect students. The remaining council delegates begged for mercy as human soldiers secured the chamber. The Mindari telepaths found their mental abilities useless against minds that existed partially outside normal space-time. The aquatic deeplings discovered that their water tanks offered no sanctuary from weapons that could strike through dimensional barriers. Dr. Maya Patel materialized beside Foster, her silver hair flowing with dimensional currents that made the air shimmer around her. We've studied your records, Council Speaker. 3,000 years of genocide disguised as exile. Hundreds of species destroyed because you feared they might challenge your authority. The galaxy deserves to know what kind of creatures have been ruling them. The truth broadcasts began immediately, transmitted on every communication frequency in known space. The crystal archives from the Kethmori ruins provided evidence of the Council's crimes stretching back millennia. Species after species had been eliminated not for being violent or dangerous, but for showing independence or innovation that threatened Council control. Admiral Collins arrived in the chamber as the last resistance was crushed throughout the system. His transformation was the most dramatic of all the human leaders. His body adapted to function as a living conduit for dimensional energies. When he spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around his words. The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved, Collins announced to representatives cowering before him. You will broadcast a message to every world in your territories. Tell them that humanity now leads this galaxy. Species that accept our rule will be protected and allowed to prosper. Those that resist will join you in exile. Zixhal found his voice despite the terror that gripped him. You cannot rule the galaxy through fear and violence. The other species will unite against you. Rodriguez stepped forward, her dimensional scars pulsing with energies that made the air crackle. You ruled through fear for 3,000 years. The only difference is that we're honest about what we are. We survived hell itself and emerged stronger. Any species that thinks they can challenge us is welcome to try. The final phase of humanity's return began as dimensional gateways opened, above every major council world simultaneously. The message was simple and delivered in perfect synchronization across hundreds of star systems. Humanity had returned from their exile, transformed into beings of incredible power, and the galaxy now belonged to them. Some species submitted immediately, recognizing that resistance was futile against enemies who controlled forces beyond their understanding. Others tried to fight and discovered that their weapons were useless against ships that existed partially outside normal reality. The few that attempted to flee found that dimensional gateways could appear anywhere, allowing human forces to pursue them across any distance instantly. The children born on New Terra during the exile played in the crystal gardens of the former council chamber, their enhanced abilities allowing them to communicate across vast distances and perceive realities that would drive unmodified beings insane. They represented the next phase of human evolution, beings who existed naturally in multiple dimensions and viewed the conquest of a single galaxy as merely the first step in their expansion. The Galactic Council's fatal mistake had been assuming that exile to Sector 66 Omega would end the human threat. Instead, it had given humanity access to powers and knowledge that transformed them from a single troublesome species into the most dangerous force the universe had ever known. They had learned to survive in hell and returned as its masters. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and the age of human dominance had only just begun.